Now I know she's sitting here dreading me doing this speech because she thinks I'm going to say something terribly embarrassing, or worst of all, get out my ukulele and start singing a song. Well, I promise you, Amelia, I'm not going to say anything embarrassing.
No.
But the ukulele? Maybe later. The night is young yet. Hi, welcome to my podcast. That was a short clip of me delivering the father of the bride speech, my daughter's wedding earlier on this year. You know, a moment of great pride to me. Also a lot of nervousness and a lot of work in preparing that, because obviously expectations are high. It went pretty well. I did put a lot of preparation work into it, and that's part of what this video is about, to share how I got to that point and see if it's useful to other similar baby boomers like me, and see if modern technology can help us get to that point. So the last time I did a speech at a wedding was over 40 years ago. It's a best man's speech. And then prior to the days of the internet, when it didn't actually exist, I trundled off down to the local library looking for books to help me write speeches from a best man's perspective. And I found a few books, one in particular by a very famous comedy writer and comedian performer called Bob Monkhouse, who was also a favourite comedian of mine as well. Incredibly witty, great writer, and wrote great wedding speech book that really helped me. Ironically, it got a particular joke in that book from 40 odd years ago that the groom used at my daughter's wedding, which was the one about getting up from a warm seat with a piece of paper in my hand this evening. So that was also in the Bob Monkhouse book. So I do think that was quite ironic. You can't beat a good joke down, can you? Anyway, in light of modern technology and the fact that I kind of work in that kind of software area, I decided that probably the best way is to go and ask AI. You know, of course, I could trundle down the library and do it in the way that I probably did 40 years ago. But I was looking for some kind of instant answers. You know, what are the protocols for, you know, father of the bride speech? You know, what's kind of the outlay? How long should the speech be, etc., and some kind of guidelines to where I get to that. So I decided to use AI. ChatGPT, we'll just put that up on the screen over here, I thought was probably the most kind of accessible one to do that. There are other AI tools around, of course, that can certainly do that for you, but I thought ChatGPT is probably, you know, one that most people know, and hopefully should have the answers to the questions. Now, delving as I have in AI tools, it's really important to get the initial question right in the first place. And that's so it kind of sets the rules and the groundwork for the AI tool to tell it exactly where you need it to go. You know, I've played around a lot with AI tools, and, you know, if you don't kind of set it right in the first place, you're often trying to backfill, and then it's making assumptions that are wrong. And the whole idea of AI is to save time, and you end up wasting loads of time. So hopefully my hints here will help you going forward. So the first thing is we need to create a prompt. That's our initial question for the AI tool. I'm going to put my initial prompt up here. This is the actual one that I used, typos and everything. And hopefully that's going to pop up here. So first of all, you are a professional speechwriter. So with AI, it's always best to kind of line it up so it's got an idea first of all, because obviously you could ask it any question in the world. So, but you're now going to say, now it's going to be around speechwriting. You start acting like a professional speechwriter. And this is good practice for AI because as I say, it defines the boundaries for it. And then I went into even further detail. That's best skill is writing wedding speeches for the father of the bride. So really then honed down. So it's not just speeches it's father of the bride wedding speeches. Then I've gone a little bit further and says in the United Kingdom. And the reason for that is obviously most of these AI tools are American, have an American bias. I'm not sure whether the rules for father of the bride speech in America are different to the UK, but they may be. But I wanted to be really, really specific because, you know, I didn't want to spend loads of time writing a speech and it says, oh, you know, you must mention this and you must mention that, and it's something that maybe is not done in the UK. So I want to make sure that it's absolutely accurate. So help me write a speech in British English. Come back to that one later. For my daughter's wedding on July the 4th. And then the most important thing, which is the last sentence, complete with typo, ask me questions to help me write the speech. Now, if I hadn't put that in, it would probably go off and kind of write a very generic speech. But what I thought, if by asking me questions, it's starting to engage me in the process and might kind of help me shape the speech as it went on, which it actually did as such. Just on the typo thing, by the way, most AI tools will understand that I meant to say ask and not ASKE. I should really have corrected that. It uses less capacity if you get all the wording right. So anyway, based on that, I then press submit, and then we'll go and have a look at the next screen to see how it responded. So answer came back pretty quickly. Brilliant. I'd be honoured to help you craft a heartfelt, funny and memorable speech, etc, etc, etc. And then it starts to ask me some questions. So, you know, it's broken them down into sections. So about me, you know, what's my name, etc. Something about my emotional feelings about writing the speech, about the bride, about the groom, the couple generally, the day itself, and so on. So, you know, 18, 20 questions, a great start. Really, really good start, because then that allowed me to start thinking about, you know, how I respond to that. And whilst I'm responding to it, it then, you know, kind of inspires me and makes me maybe start thinking about things in a different way. So let's have a look at the next screen, because I put some of my responses to that and I think that's interesting to see. So here goes. So I just went via the numbers on the questions it gave. So like number 1, Robert Smith, I'm father of the bride, emotionally, I'm excited about it, and so on and so on. And you can see that I've started to put in some questions. It's made me start to think, which is great, because now we've got this collaboration going on. You know, she works really hard and has developed her own business. Amelia introduced us to him. He's a good match, they complement each other, and so on and so on. We're now getting a bit of information. And then there's a little bit about football. There's a bit of rivalry, you know, me being a Birmingham City fan and the groom being an Aston Villa fan. So there's kind of some nice bit of rivalry that we can probably use in the speech. So that's great. Let's move on to what happened next. So unsurprisingly, it generated me a speech. It certainly wasn't the speech I ended up using, and you know, you don't get away with it quite that quickly. But it was a speech. So, you know, ladies and gentlemen, family and friends, and anybody here still clinging to the hope of 3 wine, good afternoon, etc, etc. And it's a perfectly acceptable speech. It's generic-ish. As such, it's based on, you know, it's understanding of what I want to write within the rules and the confines, and based on the questions it has asked me. But, you know, perfectly acceptable speech, just wasn't quite the way I'd have written it. And that's fine. But it certainly helped me. I've got a starting point to move on with. Now, let's have a look at what it said. You know, we've shared some wonderful moments, even during tough times. I remember us watching cheesy old antique shows, etc. And that's good. You know, it was kind of en route of what I wanted it to do. So let's have a look at what I did as a next step, because I thought, okay, good start. Let's go and see if we can start to refine this and really bring it on. So as it started to kind of feed back on, I say, suggestions and a suggested speech, that started to kind of make me think. And as I say, I didn't do this over kind of just one session. There were several sessions where you come back, give me an idea, I'd have a read of it, go away and have a think. And I think, well, you know, maybe that's not quite me. Maybe that's not quite the way I want to deliver it. And it started to inspire me, I guess. And I started to then think about, well, there's no bit in here in this speech that talks about me giving advice, fatherly, parent style advice there. So I started to push into the engine, saying, well, I need to give some advice to the couple as they're, coming to the marriage union and going forward in lives, etc. And started to think about stories in my life where advice had been given. And there was 2 or 3 instances of that. But I wanted to also add a bit of a twist to the speech as well. Whilst I was adding little bits of kind of life advice, and the speech was, generating, I started also to think about this kind of football theme that had been going on during the speech. So we'd had this kind of original part of the speech where I talk about, my daughter being born, and the circumstance of that, which was based around, well, I was watching Match of the Day when the midwife ran down the stairs, and because that's a true story. I think I was definitely watching Everton, and they were either playing Coventry City or Sheffield Wednesday, and I heard these footsteps storming down the stairs, which was the midwife that said, "You better get to hospital, PDQ," which means pretty damn quick. And I started to think, how could we bring that in? So we'd got this bit that the speech had picked up on, which was the rivalry piece, the Aston Villa Birmingham City piece. So I got a kind of a beginning piece, Match of the Day. I got this Aston Villa Birmingham City. How could I weave that in with a piece of life advice? And in all fairness, ChatGPT didn't give me the idea, but it did inspire me by keep pushing things back at me. And that's when I suddenly thought about, well, a piece of life advice might be, reading, kind of a poem or words of a song, etc., or some type of verse. And that's when the idea of the anthem from Birmingham City's team, "Keep Right On to the End of the Road," started to come in. So, and it was also appropriate. "Keep right on to the end of the road" could have, wide connotations, to do with life in general. And in fact, the song is kind of about that. Birmingham City kind of stole the song and kind of reworded it to fit the football team. But the original song itself, is quite ironic and quite sad. So anyway, that gave me a bit of an inspiration. So kind of let's go and see what happened next. So whilst that was going on, I was still going back and making further edits. So, I'd read through and say, can we change ladies and gentlemen, family, friends to, put in boys and girls? Because there were going to be kids at the wedding. So I wanted to ensure that they were kind of in there, and these little tiny things, you just send it back and it says, yeah, okay, great. Here's a new draft with that piece in, and I can go and read through. So let's move on to the next one and see what we've got. And this was another piece I wanted to weave in to do with life advice. So I'd got the idea of kind of the end kind of crescendo piece, but I wanted to put kind of a build up to that. I wanted to build up this kind of life advice theme. And again, once, I read through, it kind of inspired me a bit more. And I started to think about couple of pieces of advice that I like to kind of quote people, the pen is mightier than the sword, etc. And those kind of ones. And there was one in particular that a business associate had mentioned to me. So it wasn't exactly related to my daughter as such, although, she was around at the time. But it was one of those pieces of advice, never do a bloke a bad favour if you can do him a good favour. That I thought would weave well in to kind of wedding speech, kind of that humanisation, being kind to people and so on, that I thought would fit well, and would also disarm the audience a little bit that there was another one coming, which was more to do with a rivalry. So it's kind of a balancing act, and I kind of prompted that back in, and it kind of rewrote it for me again. I mean, that's the beauty, I suppose, of AI, is I'm not having to go in and kind of mess around with a Word document or whatever, I can just say, well, no, I needed this, and it kind of rewrites it and sends it back to me. So yeah, so that was interesting. So let's have a look at what happened next. Yeah, this was another thing I wanted to add. So now I've got this kind of, you know, football-y type thing going on. I then thought, well, teams, because, you know, marriage is about being teamwork. And so I thought, well, maybe I can bring that in. So we've got this kind of football team thing going on, and we can talk about marriage being a team, and, you know, start to bring in the, mine and my wife's kind of relationship advice passing on. So, you know, I got kind of advice passing on and teamwork passing on and the football theme passing on. And it all started to kind of weave together. And again, this was, again, over a period of a few weeks. I mean, the speech wasn't, you know, sit down and write it and pump it straight out. It was, this is an idea I've got, pass it back into the AI tool, keep the stream open in the AI tool, and just keep going back and say, you know, well, I've had a rethink on that, and what about this, and what about that, and how could it fit? And again, the beauty of the AI is you can just go and crunch that all up and bring it back. And then if you say, well, that's in the wrong order, I didn't want it there, I wanted it here instead, again, it will just go off and do that and not complain about it, which is fantastic. So let's go and see where we got to next. So then it comes back and says, okay, I've got your final speech ready. It wasn't, by the way, but it was great. It was very, very close. And, you know, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, fellow survivors of the seating plant, that was the line that I did use as my opening one. I think that's in the video there. You know, those who don't know me, it's the immense honour. So this is true. This was all kind of kept in the final speech, although it wasn't absolute final. And you know, you'd be lucky if you get everything you want. I did actually take its final one and then decide then to put that into a word processor. Just use a Google Sheet. Google Docs, sorry, not a Google Sheet, that'd be a spreadsheet. Spreadsheets was part of the speech as well, that did come in. So anyway, I did finally put that in a word processor just to do final tiny bits of tidy up, spell check, maybe just quick change a word, maybe slight different emphasis and so on. It was probably just as quick then as going back and asking AI to do it anyway, but you know, that's up to you. I'll just go and bring up last couple of screens that I've got and see where we got to. So here we have my Google Doc, and this was actually the final speech that I created. So I copied everything then from ChatGPT. It pretty well had done everything I needed it to do, because by, you know, asking me those questions and then generating speeches, which I then read, and then I'd say, well, I've got a little bit of an idea, and it popped that back in, and I'd say, no, it's not in the right order. You can even then change it to ask the tone a little. So you could say, well, it doesn't quite sound like me, and it will change that. You do have to be careful about that, because it might then change everything and things that you did previously want to keep. So you have to be very specific about that. I didn't really do much of that. I let it kind of do its thing. I just insisted that it was in British English, because otherwise it, you know, goes back to writing it in the American English with the Z's or Z's as they call them, and that can kind of be a bit frustrating. But anyway, I did go back and do that and just make sure, you know, kind of typos right. And then I did final editing in the document here. I was just using a Google Doc to do that, to just go through and make some kind of final edits. Then, so the speech was ready. So obviously then I can kind of leave it there and learn it, or I can print it off and learn it. So one final thing I did is I then copied that to my iPad. And I then used an app, a scrolling app. So there's a few around that you can get. I think the Apple's Pages will do some form of scrolling for you. I use PDF creator tool that I bought a few years back that allows scrolling. and then just kind of set the scroll speed. Now, a Father of the Bride speech is expected to be between 8 and 10 minutes long. So, I checked that in ChatGPT first of all. How long do you expect this speech to last? So I could make sure I was within the confines. I then put it onto my iPad, and then I started to practice the scrolling. Now, I did know the speech pretty well. I mean, you could just have it in front of you and sit and read off, but of course then you're not going to be making eye contact with the audience. So I knew it pretty well, and what I did, and you can probably see above here, I broke it also into sections. So I had my kind of welcome section, just scroll down on these, about my daughter, and just in kind of sections, so I could quickly look down and kind of see where we were. Now, I'm not saying I read every single word verbatim off the prompter. That would have been off-putting, and it wouldn't have allowed that audience reaction. I did practice it a lot, and committed a lot of those words to memory, and on the basis that if I got stuck, I could always stop the prompter and just go to it, and then kind of start again. So that's it. That's how my speech worked. It went pretty well. I hope there's been things in this video that kind of helped you. If it did, if you could, like my video down below, that'd be great. Even better if you could subscribe to my channel. I'm going to be doing, other kind of baby boomer inspired podcast videos as we go on. And hopefully see you soon, and thank you for watching.
So for your first speech, could you please put your hands together for the father of the bride?
Thank you very much, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, boys, girls, family, friends, acquaintances, and fellow survivors of the seating plan, good afternoon. For those of you I've not had the pleasure to meet yet, my name is Robert, and I've the immense honour of being the father of this very beautiful bride just to my side.